Howdy everybody, David Minkin here, starting player with Connect More, and welcome to another Kickstarter edition of Avoid the Rules, a video of instruction and demonstration that helps ease rule understanding and learning. Easy start. And today I'm featuring a really nice little fast playing card game called Vaults, and so you see the cards right here. Now I should stress that since this is a Kickstarter version, I have played this game and done the review on a print and play version of the game. So what you're going to see me playing with does not represent the quality of the components, but the artwork that's on this game is just gorgeous artwork. It's kind of got a steampunk feel to it. Is going to be representative of what you're going to see on the Kickstarter. So keep that in mind when you're watching the video. Now Vaults is a game that plays 2 to 4 players, and its primary mechanic is the action point allowance system. I like the action point allowance system because it helps you prioritize what is important on your turn. And as you can imagine in a card game, there's of course going to be hand management and some card drafting that's going to occur throughout the course of the game. Now, when you look at the length of this video, don't be scared. I like to do a very quick overview. It's going to be done, 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. You'll have a feeling for what the game is. But then I like to get into it in more detail. I like to analyze the cards. I like to talk about it in a little bit more detail, and I'll do that afterwards. So if you're not into that, then don't worry about it. But you can just watch the first little bit of the video and you'll be up and running, and hopefully you'll see if this game is right for you. If you want to see additional thoughts on the game after we've gone through all of that, I'll of course have my final thoughts at the end of the video. And I hope I can see you there. So without any further ado, let's get started and learn about Vaults. So this is Vaults. Now before I start talking about all the cool cards you see laid out in front of you and talking about the game sequence and the turn order, the most fundamental question I have when I'm learning a game is, well, how the heck do I win? I'm here to have fun, but I want to beat you, darn it. And so the way you win this game is the first player to achieve 400 pounds, I'm talking about the British currency, wins the game. Immediately wins the game. Woohoo! Now there are variable victory conditions provided to you in the rules depending on the number of players that are playing and the type of game experience you're looking to have, but the default victory condition is to be the first person to achieve 400 pounds. Great. So the next question you probably have is, well, how do I get my grubby little hands on some of this money? Well, as you can imagine in a game called Vaults, the money is probably safely, well for now anyhow, safely tucked behind or stashed away in vaults. And if you guessed that, then you've guessed absolutely correctly. Here you see 3 piles of vault cards, and these piles are referred to as the public vaults. Now if we take a quick look at what a vault card looks like, it looks something like this. You'll notice that a vault card actually has 3 numbers on it. Each of these numbers represent the different skill sets that you and your crew are going to have in order to have the opportunity to crack into one of these vaults. And I'll explain how you're going to build these skill sets in just a few moments. But what they represent here are your physical strength that you need to crack into the vault, your mechanical skills, and then your knowledge of explosives. So you're going to have to build a crew that will have all 3 of these skill sets at least these levels indicated on the vault card. And if you achieve that, then on your turn you'll have the opportunity to crack open to that vault, and oh no! Did I say you can earn money this way? Well, absolutely you can earn money this way, but you can also get caught. If you're out cracking safes, well, you can bet that the police are out after you as well, and they are going to try to stop you, and you're going to be penalized along the way if you have an unsuccessful crack. And what I just did there is an unsuccessful crack. But you would still take this vault and you would actually take it back into your personal playing area. But normally what you're going to see is you're going to see other cards where you crack the vault and on the back it'll show a currency amount or a number of pounds that you've achieved. So you would take that amount and you would put it into your personal play area as well. And as you continue to crack vaults throughout the game, you will continue to get more and more money in your private vault pile. And once you've achieved 400 pounds in your private vault pile, then woohoo, you've won, provided you're the fastest person to do that. So why don't we take a quick look back and go, well, you've shown me all of these skill sets that I need to have to crack open a vault. Well, how am I going to actually achieve these skills, and how am I going to build those skill sets up? Well, that takes us to the main deck, and this is the main deck for Vault. The main deck consists of a whole bunch of cards, but of all the cards, there are 3 main types of cards that you're going to find inside the main deck. The first type of card that I want want to talk about is what's referred to as the boss card. Now the boss card is pretty self-explanatory. He's got a big B on the upper left-hand corner, which means boss. And then there's always a really kind of cool art. I just love the artwork in this game, and it's got the steampunk kind of feel, but it's really well done, and I love how they've integrated it with the rest of the card. But I digress. But anyhow, you'll see this artwork and the name of the person on your the boss of your team, but you also see that on this side there are those same three symbols that we saw in each of the vault cards. So this represents the skill set that this particular person brings to your vault cracking crew. So you see that this boss only has a level 1 kind of mechanical skill. But the cool thing about bosses, each and every one of them has a special skill or a special privilege that they're allowed to take should they successfully crack a vault. All the bosses are the same, and this privilege is taken on a successful crack. Now that example I showed you at the beginning of the game where the vault actually failed, and I'll grab that right here, where you actually had failed, this is not a successful crack, so it would not trigger your boss's special ability. So that's the boss. But you can't have an Ocean's 11 with only Daniel Ocean, now can you? You need to have members of your crew as well. So the second type of card that you're going to find in the main deck are what's referred to as your crew member cards, and that's indicated with an M. And again, here you see the super cool artwork and the name here, and that's just for flavor. It helps you feel immersed into the theme a little bit more. But again, you see, as far as gameplay is concerned, you see these three symbols that are right here, and this again represents the skill sets that this particular member of your crew brings to the table. So this particular lady, Emily, she's got a level 3 mechanical skills. Again, she doesn't have any physical skills. I guess she doesn't like to get her fingernails too dirty, and she doesn't have any knowledge of explosives. But all of the crew member cards also have a special ability on the bottom of the card. But what's different about the special ability of a crew member card as opposed to the boss card is that these special abilities are triggered immediately when the crew member is played from your hand. So that's the difference. The boss card is special ability is triggered when you have successfully crack a vault, whereas the crew member special ability is triggered when it is played. So we have bosses, we have crew members, and you can't all do this just with your hands and gloves and balaclavas. Sometimes it requires some tools. So tool cards are indicated with a T, as you might imagine, and another super cool drawing in the name up here. And like the other two cards, you can see their strength in the three different abilities that you need to crack the vault here on the side as well. Now all of the tools have an ability which is referred to as overloading. By overloading a tool, it allows you to essentially double the values seen here for each of the skill sets required to crack the vault. So for this particular tool, if I were to overload it, this would become 4 and that would become 4. But we'll talk about that in a brief second. So here you go. Here are the three different types of cards that you can have. You can have the boss card, you can have the crew member card, and you can have the tool cards. Now there's one other type of card that's present in the game which I have not yet mentioned, and that's what's referred to as the disrupt cards, and that's this deck right here. Now the disrupt cards look like this. Each of the disrupt cards has two different abilities written on them. There's one on the top and there's one on the bottom. There's always a big or on them. So disrupt cards are a way that really forces player interaction throughout the game, and there's a lot of screwage and a lot of, take that, and you also can use them to help protect yourself when you think people are out trying to get you. So we'll talk about disrupt cards in a little bit and when and how you might be able to use them. But I just want to point them out to you so you know what's hiding in that deck right over here. So we've talked very briefly about all the different types of cards that are present in vaults. And we also know what the victory condition is. And we also know to work our way towards that victory condition, we need to start cracking some vaults. Now, you'll recall that in order to crack a vault, we need to build a vault cracking crew. And this is the whole crux of the game. But we need to build a vault cracking crew that will meet or exceed the skill sets required to crack into any one vault. So in this particular vault, you need 5 physical skill, 3 mechanical skills, and 1 knowledge of explosives, and woohoo, you would actually have a successful crack and you'd earn some money. Now in order to build a crew, we are going to use the cards from the main deck, which again is going to be the crew boss, and every crew can only ever have 1 boss. Now if you're an Ocean's 11 fan, you all know there's only 1 Daniel Ocean, so every crew can only have 1 boss. Crews are not obliged to have a boss, but if they do, they can only have 1. Now, throughout the course of the game, we'll be taking cards from this pile and we'll be building up our hands, and we can continue to play crew members. And so let's just say take for example, we had this card and we had another crew member. You can continue to play crew members, and generally you play crew members to the right of the boss to keep them straight, and you can play up to 4 crew members in any one crew. In addition, we can also play additional tools onto any one crew, and you can have a maximum of 3 tools in any one crew. So your maximum limits are 3 tools, 1 boss, and 4 crew members. And so very simply, what you do is you continue to build these crews. You're not limited to just one. You may have another crew over here. Now, tools cannot be placed by themselves. You cannot start a crew with only tools because you need somebody to actually operate the tools. So here in this particular example, you see that we actually have 2 unique crews. We've got one on the top and one on the bottom. One on the bottom doesn't have a boss. Now very simply then on your turn, in order to decide what your strength, your combined strength of all 3 skill sets are for your crew, you just simply add up the numbers for each skill set across the row. So for this particular example, we have 4 plus 2 is 6 physical strength, then 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10. We have 10 mechanical skills, and we have 4 knowledge of explosives. So you see, for that particular example, this crew would have the ability to actually crack open this vault. So woohoo! So that's as simple as it is. Throughout the course of the game, you're going to be building these crews, you're going to be cracking vaults, and then you can start moving crews around and you can start doing a variety of things. Now, along the way, it's not that simple. It's not just crew solitaire or multiplayer vault cracking. No. There's also going to be these interaction cards that you'll have the opportunity to play. And we'll talk about that when we actually start talking about the play in the game sequence. So that's a very quick overview of vaults. Next, let's talk about how the game is actually going to be played. So at the beginning of the game, each player is going to be dealt 2 boss cards from the dealer. Now each player will take an opportunity to look at the 2 boss cards, and you get to decide which one you want to keep. So here I'm looking at the 2 boss cards and I look at them, I go, you know what, I'm going to keep Marana King. I like her better. So I'm going to hold on to this boss card, and I'm going to take the other boss card that I was given, I'm going to give it back to the dealer. The dealer will take all of the returned boss cards and shuffle them back into the main deck, so they will be available throughout the rest of the game. Once everybody has done that, we will play our boss card down in front of us in our tableau. We are now starting our first crew. We got a boss out and we're ready to start cracking some vaults. So that's the very beginning of the game. After all the additional boss cards have been shuffled back into the main deck, the dealer will then proceed to deal out 3 more cards to each of the players, and you will put those in your hand. So it looks something like this. Now these cards you actually keep hidden, but I'm just showing you here for demonstration purposes here. So you see I got a crew member card, a tool card, and another crew member card here inside my hand. Now your hand limit throughout the course of the game is 5 cards. But the cool thing is you may surpass your hand limit or exceed your hand limit during the course of your turn, but at the end of your turn, should you have any more cards, so 6 or more cards left in your hand, well then you'd actually have to discard back down to 5. And by discarding cards, you'd actually put them next to your main deck pile right here, and this area is going to be referred to as the police station, and I'll explain that in a second. Now for the remainder of the video, I'm going to go through the 4 different phases that you can take during your turn. I'm not actually going to do a turn-by-turn game sequence here. I'm just going to talk about the phases and the actions you may take for each of those phases and try to show you examples as we go along. Now recall that this is an action point allowance system game. So on your turn, you're allowed to take 3 actions. There are cards that will allow you to get additional actions, and we'll point those out as we go along, but the default is 3 actions on your turn. But there are also 4 phases throughout the course of the game that you may take these actions in, and these phases must be played in order. The first phase is what's referred to as the recruit phase, or basically the drawing phase. So here we have 3 cards in our hand, and you may choose that now is the time for you to actually add more cards into your hand. And so this would be the recruit phase. Now to do this, you may choose to take cards from the face down main deck, and so each card that you take counts as 1 action. So I would take this card and I see, oh look at this, I actually grabbed a boss card that was shuffled back into the deck, and I actually get to add that into my hand. If I choose to take cards that are face down, I may only take cards that are face down, because throughout the course of the game there will also be cards that will be discarded as we play, and as they're discarded into two separate piles. The tools are discarded into their own pile, and any of the crew member or boss cards are discarded into a separate pile. So here's another boss card here, and he might be discarded into this pile. So in effect there are actually two discard piles, which you see right here. One for tools and one for crew members and bosses, or for the people. Now this area is referred to as the police station. It's pretty neat because here I like to think of these guys as kind of like the holding cell. These are guys that on your turn, should you choose to actually start recruiting your vault cracking team, is you can actually go to the prison cell and actually bail out some guys that you know that are really good. You can bail them out, and should you choose to do that, you would take the topmost card and you would add that to your hand, and again that would count as an action. Or similarly, you can wander over to the evidence room. Some old tools have been confiscated from old vault vault cracking attempts that have gone bad, and you may also choose to take from the tool pile as well. For recruiting, to recap, you can either take face down cards from the main deck, or you may choose to take cards from the face-up piles, which are referred to as the police station. You cannot mix and match your source of cards, and each card that you take and put into your hand would count as one action. So here you see I've added an additional card into my hand. That would count as an action. So moving on, we next have the planning phase. So now you've got in your hand, these are all the thugs. This is your crew hanging out in your hideout, and you guys want to start putting together a plan. You see that there are some vaults available for you to be cracked, and now it's time to start getting these guys out here so that they may go to work for you later in your turn, or perhaps in a future turn. And so the way you would simply do this is you can just, for one action, you can take a card from your hand and you can add it to any of the crews in your playing tableau. Or you can even choose to start a new crew. So here, for example, I may even start a new crew. You do not need a boss to actually start a crew. A boss is not mandatory to have any crew. So for each card I choose to take out of my hand and place into my player tableau, whether it be into a pre-existing crew or by creating a new crew, each one of those cards would cost me one action to do so. Now, one thing I should point out is you cannot put a tool all by itself in its own crew, because there's actually nobody there to actually operate the tool, so you would not be able to do that. But you would be able to add a tool to a previously existing crew, whether it have a member or a boss, or in this case both. So each one of those things would cost an action. But you can also move people around between your crews during this phase. So let's just take a few more cards here, for example, and let's suppose I have this other crew started up here. I might decide that this lady might be better down into this crew, so I could move her into that crew, and that would cost one action. Or I may choose that I might want to swap these two bosses, so I could just swap them like that, and that would count as one action. So you can do a variety of things during this phase to get your crew set up the way that you want for the next phase, which is called the job phase, or the vault cracking phase. This is where you're actually going to get your crews to go and crack these vaults. Now, the reason why you may want to be shifting your crew members around a little bit is each crew may only attempt to crack one vault on your turn. So if this crew had the appropriate skill sets to crack, say for example, this vault, they would not be able to crack another vault on their turn because they've already had one go at it. But during the cracking phase, or the job phase, you could then, for an action, move one member to another crew, and that resets the member that you just moved. So then I could attempt to crack a second vault with this crew here in the bottom with this member who was actually used in the initial crack as well. But in order to do this, you'd basically have to jump immediately into the crack phase on your turn. You'd have to skip the recruit phase and the planning phase, because in order to do that, you'd take one action to crack a vault, and then you take one action to move this crew member to the next team, and then you take your third action to crack a second vault. And that would be your 3 actions that you'd be allowed on your turn. So in that particular example, you see I've skipped some phases, but again, each phase must be respected in the order in which it arrives on your turn, and you're limited to your 3 actions, and you can choose to spend them in whatever phase or phases that are appropriate for you on that particular turn. Now, the other thing I should point out, when you go to crack a vault, you may choose to overload your tool, and you'll recall that I mentioned this briefly at the overview of the game, and by overloading a tool, it allows you to double the value, each of these values, on the tool card. But the consequence of doing that is then, once you have attempted to crack a vault with the particular crew that this tool is a member of, then this tool is immediately sent to the police station, and here you go into the evidence room here with the other tools. So Normally, if you crack a vault and you have not overloaded the tool, it remains a part of the crew. It remains in place. But by overloading it, it automatically gets sent to the police station for getting that extra benefit of doubling up on the values. Now, this consequence happens regardless if the vault attempt is successful or not. Now, the cool thing too about the crack phase is here we're assuming that we're going to try to crack one of these 3 public vaults that are face up in front of us, but you may also attack private vaults. So as you see here throughout the course of the game, as you crack vaults, whether it be a success or a failure, you're always creating this pile right here of vaults. These are what are referred to as your private vault pile. So you may choose to crack somebody else's private vault, and it's going to be the topmost private vault that the other person has. So this becomes a really interesting part of the game, because once you crack a vault, you must show everybody else what you achieve. So for this particular case, wow, 170 pounds, that's a huge success, and you're going to plunk it right down there. Immediately everybody knows that you've got a huge juicy vault right there, and so why are they going to go and try to crack some of these other things when they can start attacking you? So there are a variety of strategies on how to handle this. One strategy might be to crack this vault, the big vault, right away on your turn, and to use a second crew to perhaps crack a smaller vault on your same turn that would then bury this below the smaller vault. So if somebody else wants to get at that bigger number, they're going to have to work double as hard to get at it. So that's one particular strategy you might want to use. Another strategy might be to have an appropriate disrupt card in here, and I don't know if I can find one here, but here's one. It goes, for example, exchange up to 2 crew members with any others in the game. So you may hold on to this and wait until somebody says, hey, I'm going to come during their crack phase on their turn. They're going to come and they're going to try to crack my big juicy vault that I have on top of my pile. Well, then I can play this and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play this on you, and I'm going to take 2 of my really terrible crew members, and I'm going to exchange them with perhaps 2 of their great crew members that they need in order to achieve this particular combination. And then by changing up the crew, then now they may not have a crew that would have the skill set required to actually crack this vault for this example that we're talking about. And in doing that, then that person actually, they do not actually lose their action, because the action is only triggered once they've taken the vault card and flipped it over and shown everybody what's behind it. But you have stopped them. So even though they haven't taken that action, they are still obliged to stay within the crack phase. Anytime you move from one phase to the next on your turn, regardless of if you've taken an action or not, you are obliged to stay in that phase. You're not allowed to go back. So say, as an example, somebody else tried to crack your private vault on their first action of their turn. By doing so, they've declared that they are now in the crack phase. If I canceled that action or made it difficult for them to be able to do that by playing, for example, this disrupt card, they may choose not to take that action, but they cannot go all the way back to either the recruit phase or the planning phase. Instead, they're obliged to stay within the crack phase. So if they have another crew, they may then choose to slide some other crew members back up to the crew that would be required to crack the vault and perhaps have a second go at it, provided that they have enough actions. So I hope that makes sense. So after the crack phase, we have the 4th and final phase, which is referred to as the hideout phase. Now the hideout phase is essentially the same as the planning phase. You can now you're again allowed to play cards from your hand into your player tableau, provided you have sufficient actions to do so. You can again move players around between one crew and another. You can do all of that basically during the hideout phase. And so those are the 4 phases. So for a recap, you can either recruit either from the face down deck or from the police station. You can plan, which will require you to move cards around in your player tableau from one crew to the next, or to play cards from your hand into your player tableau. Then you will do the job phase, which will allow you to crack vaults. And during the job phase, you can still move characters from one crew to another. And in doing so, you will reset a character. But you will never reset a crew. Once a crew has attempted to crack a vault, then that crew cannot be used a second time during the same turn to crack an additional vault. After that, we'll go to the hideout phase, and again, the hideout phase is provided you have the actions available to do so. You can start playing cards again from your hand into your player tableau and continue to move your cards around. So there you have it. So as you can probably tell, these disrupt cards are very powerful cards to have in your hand because they can be used to attack players, they can be used to protect yourself, and they can be used to basically better your own progress as you play the game. And the cool thing about disrupt cards is they do not cost any actions to play, and they can be played at any time. So how do we actually get these cards? Because we know to get crew member, tool, and boss cards, we can draw them from the deck or from the police station here. But then how the heck are we supposed to get these disrupt cards? Well, there are two ways that you can get the disrupt cards. Some of the crew member cards actually have a special ability down here that says draw a disrupt card. I'll see if I can find one here for you. Here we go. So when you play this particular card, when you play Clement's Footer, he says draw a disrupt card. And so once you play him, you take this action immediately and you get a disrupt card into your hand. So that is one way you can get disrupt cards. The second way you can get disrupt cards is should you have a boss card in your hand, and here we see that we actually do, as an action I can actually take this boss card, and instead of trying to play him and to start a new crew with him, I could choose to actually send him to the police station as an action on my turn. So I will say, right, I'm going to send here John King the Spider. He's not very useful for me. I think a disrupt card would be more powerful, so I'm going to take this card, I'm going to send him to jail, and in return I get to draw a disrupt card and add it to my hand. So for the next part of my video, I'm going to break down the cards for you. I'm going to take a quick look at the vault cards, and we're going to break down the risk versus reward. We're going to look at the probabilities of being able to successfully crack one particular vault versus another. And then we're going to take a closer look at some of the cards in the main deck because I want to highlight some of the abilities of the crew members, the bosses, and the tools, and how that knowledge will be useful for when you're actually going to crack some vaults. So let's take a quick look at all the vault cards that are present in the game. And the way I've divided them out here, I've divided them into 3 different rows. And these rows are divided by the first number or the physical strength required to crack into any one vault. So for the top row, the physical strength required is 9. For the middle row, the physical strength required is 7, right up through there. And for the bottom row, the physical strength required is 5. So that is true for all of the cards you see in each row. Then I've also divided them into groups because the cards that are together require exactly the same combination as the card that they're with. So for example, both of these cards here, they both have the same combination, 976. And then we go to these cards here, they both have the same combination as well, 965. And so I've ordered them by like combinations, and I've also ordered them from left to right in terms of most difficult combination to achieve with the same starting number in the row down to the least difficult number to achieve. So for example, the 3 vaults over here, their combination is 753, whereas the 3 vaults over here on the right hand side are 742. So you don't need quite as many skills in both the mechanical or the explosive skills to be able to crack these vaults. And why have I decided to break it up this way? Well, you'll see that there are 3 sets of combinations for each row of cards that I have. So for example, all of the cards that require a 9 physical strength to open, there's going to be 3 different combinations present in the game. Similarly, for all the cards that need a 7 physical strength to open, there are going to be 3 different sets of cards in the game, and likewise for the 5. Now, why does this matter? Well, because it's going to affect our probability of success, and it's also going to impact our reward, what we're going to get should we successfully crack the vault. So let's flip these cards over, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So here we have all of the cards flipped over, and immediately there should be a few things that pop out to you. On the top row of cards, the cards that required a 9 physical strength to crack, these are the juiciest cards in terms of success. The range goes from 130 pounds to 200 pounds. But even though they give the biggest reward, they also have the biggest risk, because you'll see that for each group there is 1 fail card, which gives you a 50% chance of failure or a 50% chance of success. So, you know, even though the reward is big, the failure, if you fail, you're going to have to pay some consequences. And if you read the card, you'll see that consequences of failing this vault crack are the most severe of any of the other cards. Here you must send one boss, one crew member, and one tool to the police station. That's potentially up to 3 items or people from that crew that attempted to crack this vault, all gone. So that's a lot of your actions that you're burning up because you failed to crack this vault. But you get a little bit of compensation. You get to draw 1 card and gain 1 action for your efforts. So all is not lost, but whew, that's pretty brutal. So if we move down to the middle row of cards, and again, you'll recall that these were the cards that required a 7 physical strength to open, along with the other mechanical skills and the knowledge of explosives. You'll see that for each group of cards, there's 3 now in each group, and there's still only 1 fail card. So now your probability of success is now 66% or 67%, or 2 out of 3, and so your probability of success is better than the uppermost row of vaults. But you'll see that the reward is also less. It ranges from 60 pounds to 100 pounds. So you got to keep that in mind. Your probabilities of getting a good success are good, but they're not quite as juicy. Now if you fail, the consequence is a little less severe. Here it says send 1 crew member and 1 tool to the police station. So your boss in this particular case is going to be fine. But then you also get to draw 1 card and gain 1 action for your efforts. So the fail card for all of these rows is exactly the same. The fail card for the top row is the same. The fail card for the middle row is the same. And now we go down to the bottom row, and you'll see now that for each combination set there are 4 cards in each set, again with only 1 fail card. So your probability of success has now moved up to 75%. But your reward is much less juicy. It's not as sexy. You go from 20 pounds to 40 pounds, and so it's not really all that exciting. And you see that if you look at the fail card, it says send 1 crew member to the police station, gain 1 action. So here you still lose somebody and you gain an action out of your efforts out of it. So you don't really lose that much in this particular example. So it's really interesting to look at the cards this way, because when you look at the best card in the deck versus the worst card in the deck, it's an order of magnitude difference. You go from 20 pounds to 200 pounds with a bunch of stuff in between. So when you look at this, you go, wow, then this really changes things, because now that I understand how these cards are, well, you realize that you just can't get to 400 pounds on this bottom row. So the bottom row tends, for me at least, tends to be a good row to attack when you want to start burying cards, because you really need to be targeting this middle row and the upper row, and you need to be doing it in a good and effective way so that you don't get totally burned by the fails, because there's a good chance that you will fail throughout the course of the game. But you need to be able to get these cards into your private vault and then stash them away and hide them. And so that's where this bottom row comes in handy, because if you can just hide them with a 30 pounds here and 20 pounds there, even though these will add up throughout the course of the game, they're really effective ways to be able to start burying some of the bigger cards and to work your way to target these bigger cards and then bury them quickly so people can't get at them. So if you allow me to digress very quickly, is this whole idea of taking bigger cards and adding them to your private vault pile and then burying them with smaller cards so that it's less lucrative or it takes more work for an opponent to try to snatch them away from you, reminds me of Picomino. Now, if you're familiar with the game of Picomino, then you'll know exactly what I'm saying makes sense, but let me just describe it to you very quickly. Picomino is a really light dice tossing game, and so what you're going to do is you're going to throw a bunch of dice, and throughout the course of your turn, you're going to actually add up all your dice. I won't get into the details of how you do it, but suppose I rolled 29. Then I would actually take from the common pool, should it be available, I would take this little domino here, and it has 3 worms on it, which is pretty good, because at the end of the game, the person with the most worms actually wins. But now this actually goes from the common area to my private area. Just like in this game, you have the public vaults and then you have your private vault. So once this moves into my private area, well, that didn't sound very good. I did it. Once this moves into my tableau, I don't want worms in my private area, but once this moves into my tableau, then it's still available for other people, should they roll a 29 on their turn, to take this away from me. And so it's a big swing, because you're losing these worms plus they're gaining the worms. So then you may start targeting from the public area the smaller numbers. So here's 21, and again it works exactly the same way as it does in vault. So you would put this domino on top, and in essence you have now buried the bigger domino. So if anybody wants to steal dominoes from you, they have to work their way through the pile until they get at the good stuff. So if you're familiar with Piccolomino, then you'll see exactly how this makes sense. It's the same idea. You want to be targeting the medium and higher range stuff. That's how you're going to win the game, but you still need this little stuff to help protect your assets along the way. So those are the vault cards. So very quickly, I wanted to show you the cards that are in the main deck. The top row are all the boss cards. The middle row here, most of the crew member cards in the deck. It's not all of them. And here in the bottom, we have the tool cards. The only reason why I'm showing you this, and it's not in any particular order, is I just want to draw your attention to the fact that if you look along the crew member cards, none of them have any knowledge of explosives. This bottom number of the 3 numbers of the skill sets, for all of them is 0. Whereas they tend to have either specific knowledge in either the physical strength or the mechanical abilities, but they don't tend to have, or they don't have any knowledge in both. So they're very specific in what they can do. They're either your muscle, or they got some knowledge of, some mechanical bits here. So that's important to point out, because if you'll recall on the vault cards, every single vault that you need to crack has a combination of all 3 of these numbers. None of them are ever 0. There's always a number in each of these 3 spaces. So why is that important? Well, because you need to get explosives knowledge, and the only way you can do that is through your tools, which here are on the bottom. And you see that tools always have an explosive ability to them, or you can get them through your bosses, and they don't always have an explosive ability to them, but most of the bosses actually do. And the bosses tend to have skill sets in 2 things, unless they have a pretty powerful ability on a successful crack, and so then they might not have so much skills on the side there. So the only reason why I point that out for you is because when you're going to crack a vault, you need to have at least some tools in your crew, or you need to have 1 crew boss. And remember, you're restricted to having only 1 crew boss per crew, so the maximum amount of explosives knowledge you can have in a crew without any tools is 2. And there's not a lot of vaults out there with a low number of explosives on them. There are a few, but these are the really tiny little vaults here as well. So you're not going to succeed in the game if you're not working the tools to your advantage, because you definitely need to have these to successfully crack the bigger vaults. And you're also going to see that you're probably going to burn through a lot of these tools, because by overloading them, you can double up their skills, and it'll help you get into some of these vaults, especially when there's a race for them. Because as I showed you on those vault cards, everyone knows that there's going to be a race for some of the big juicy cards, especially if you had the ability to scout it out beforehand, or you've even seen somebody earn it and it's in their private pile. You're going to want to make sure that you have a good set of tools available to you so that you can get after those vaults in a timely fashion. So that's the only reason why I want to show you this, just to show you some of the other kind of dynamics that are introduced to this game by the way that the cards are set up. Well, welcome back. I hope all of the discussion in this video has helped you decide whether or not that this game is appropriate for you and your game group, and whether or not it's something you want to actually add to your game collection. Now, is it appropriate for me and my game group? Because if you follow some of my videos, you know that I tend to really like the big and heavy games. Those are the ones that I love to play, but my complaint about them always is I can never get a chance to play them. The nice thing about Vaults is upon printing it out and started playing with it, I was playing with my wife every night. Why? Because the very first game that we played, I read the rules and we played through the game, and it was about 35 minutes. We zipped through the game. It was lickety-split. And that's how every experience has been for me. The other cool thing that I really like about this game is the theme. I cannot believe that this kind of vault cracking theme has not really been used yet. I kind of put out a question on my Facebook page, Connect More Board Games, shameless plug, but on my Facebook page saying, hey, does anybody know any other game like this? And I didn't get too many responses back, and it's really quite cool, because the thing I like about this is I can introduce this to a lot of non-gamers like my parents or whatever, and immediately they start talking about Ocean's 11, they start talking about the Italian Job. You can theme this any way you want. I think that they did a really nice job also tying into steampunk. For me, I'm not a big steampunk guy. It's not like a some people see a particular item like zombies or steampunk and ooh, I must have it. I'm not that way, but the artwork on this game is just, it's really nice. I really quite like it, and I understand that this might be one of the levels in the Kickstarter, which has got me pretty excited, because I think the artwork when you flip through the cards is really quite neat. Here's one of the tool cards, and the way that they've integrated the art and the cards, and it just all works really nice together. So when I show up and I put this game on the table, say, you know what, it's going to take less than half an hour to play. It's a card game, everyone's quite familiar with it. It also gives me a chance to actually introduce some other types of mechanics. The action point allowance mechanic is something that I enjoy in other games as well. Like another one that I'm playing right now that integrates that into the game is a coal baron. It has that when you're actually, you know, moving your coal shaft up and down. And I really like that mechanic because it helps you prioritize what's important to you on your turn, and then you're trying to decide, well, how you're going to make it all work. And it's got that twist in it, so for kind of non-gamers, it's you can see like, wow, this is neat. This is I like the theme. I like how I have to choose what I'm going to do. So all of that's interesting. The next thing I like more on the gamer side of me is I love the screwage in this game. It is awesome because I showed an example of Picomino, how you basically can take worms and you can steal them. But in Picomino, my complaint about it, and again, it's only just a light dice rolling game, my complaint about Picomino is sometimes I want to take a big tile from somebody else, but I just simply can't because you're relying on the luck of the die or luck of the dice to actually get that number. And sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not, but you're trying to do it. You want to screw them, but you just can't get the dice roll. Whereas in this game, what's really awesome is that you can actually prepare and plan to screw people. So I find that this game rewards the patient because, as I showed you in the probabilities of the cards, it just zings you really badly if you get a failed vault crack, especially if you're going for those big ones. You can get your whole crew annihilated. So this game rewards the patient player who will sit back and wait for people to go through that process. And since everybody always has to flip over their vault when they attempt to crack it, whether it be successful or not, you can start working out the probabilities of the big cards. And so when they start coming up, you might know right away, okay, that's a successful vault because I saw the other one was unsuccessful. And then you can prepare for that, and you've been working your whole game for that, so that when you take that card, or somebody else's take that card, you've got a crew ready to pounce on top of them. You can prepare to pounce on top of people as soon as they get a particular vault that you're looking for, especially the big ones. I like to sit back and wait for the big ones, let somebody else do the dirty work, and then attack them. Yeah, so what I see as a positive, other people are going to see as a negative, because as soon as they get a big score, if they've done all the heavy lifting, then have me trudge along and just kind of steal it away from them, and then somebody else comes and steals it away from me, you might kind of get this, you know, domino effect of everybody just kind of taking things back and forth from each other, especially the big cards. Everybody wants that big card because it can swing the game so heavily. The victory condition is 400 pounds, which is a default victory condition. You can change it depending on what you like, but I find 400 pounds is a good default condition for this game, is that if you got that card that's 170 pounds, everybody wants it because that represents almost half of the entire amount. So you're going to start getting a lot of people just screwing, you know, screwage here, screwage there, and that might make the game drag on a little bit longer than it should, because it is, after all, it's supposed to be just a light card game. So in order to prevent that, you just need to be smarter about your play. You basically need to be able to get that card and then bury that card as fast as you possibly can, whether it be through disrupt cards or through being able to crack a second vault. So that's the one downfall I see people might not appreciate in this game, is that once people start doing this take that, it's not just a take that and then you walk away. It's a take that, we'll take that, take that, take that, especially if you're playing with people who've played it a long time. So that might make the game go on a little bit longer than maybe you anticipate. And if that's the case, well, then the cool thing is, instead of making 400 pounds your victory condition, make it 300 pounds, and then you may have that kind of home run, you know, boom, two vault cracks and you're done. But then on the flip side, that might leave a sour taste in your mouth, because like, oh, that just ended so quickly. So depending on what your game experience is, if you like kind of that ability to just go for that one quick home run, then, you know, lower that amount. And if you want it to be the game experience that the authors want you to have, well, then keep it at 400 pounds. I personally think 400 pounds is good. So that's it. It's a very simple card game. It's got a mechanic that I really like. I like the action point allowance mechanic. I like that when it's tied into games. It's very small, compact. The theme is fantastic. The art is great. It's something I can whip out at any time and play and enjoy my experience while playing it, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Once you start playing it, you know, 25 minutes, you play it, you're done, and then you move on. And it's just a nice light game to end the night on as soon as the kids go off to bed. So I hope that this has given you enough information to be able to make a decision about whether or not this is appropriate for you. If I haven't answered all your questions or you think I might have gotten something wrong, please leave a comment below or come visit me on Connect More Board Games on Facebook. I really enjoy the like, or come follow me on YouTube. It would be great to see you in future videos. Cheers.